A little while ago, we introduced the idea of if statements. If statements are a way to control the behavior of our program. So based on its input from either the user or another program, it can do certain things. If statements end up being very useful. Unfortunately, there ends up being times where we have a ton of if statements in our program, and that part of the program with the if statements becomes a little bit difficult to read. Well, it turns out that Java includes a feature called a switch statement. A switch statement is a way to structure your program when it has a bunch of different if statements all in one place, and they need to be kind of cleaned up and combined a little bit. And that's what we'll be taking a look at in this video. So up on the screen, I've already put together a sample program for us. The idea is we have a grade out of 10, and based on that, we want to check and see what letter grade is associated with that grade. Before we start messing around with switch statements, let's go through this program and see how it works. So initially, I have a variable called grade, and I've assigned the value 10 to it, right? So this represents someone getting a perfect score on some assignment. After that, I have several if statements. So the first if statement I have checks to see whether grade is equal to 10, right? So it's checking for a perfect score. If this ends up being true, then it's going to jump down here to the first print statement. So it's going to print out A plus, a perfect score. But let's say our grade is actually lower than that. Maybe it's something like a 9. Well, in that case, this if statement here will end up being false, and so the print won't execute. It'll jump down to the next condition. So it'll check to see, hey, is grade equal to 9? Well, if it is, then it'll print out this message. Final grade is an A. Maybe our score is even lower though. Maybe our score is something like a 7. Then the program would continue on. It would first check to see whether the grade is equal to 8, right? If it's a little bit lower. And if it is, it would print out a B. But if our grade is actually a 7, then it needs to keep on going. So it would skip printing this as well. It would finally get down to here, grade equals 7. And this is the if statement that actually matches what our grade is. Remember we said it happens to be 7. In that case, it's just going to trigger this print statement right here and print out your final grade as a C. Now, if grade was an even lower number, like for example a 3, all of those 4 if statements there that you see, all of these would all end up being false. In that case, nothing will be printed from them, and your program will end up going to the else branch. In the else branch, it'll just print out the letter D, right? That's your final grade. So for anything else, you just get a D. We're not going to specifically check for what the number is. We're just going to say that if none of the other scores matched up, you got a D. So let's run this real quick and see what the output is. So initially, right, I have my grade equal to 10, so I should get a message telling me I have a perfect score. And yes, that's what I see. Let's try changing it to be something else. Let's put in, for example, a 7. Compile and run it and see what we get. Over here, we get the message saying final grade is a C. So it looks like this program works pretty well. The issue we have with this program, though, is that it's starting to be a little bit more complicated than it needs to be because it has so many if statements here. And so what we said earlier is that Java provides a way to make this a little bit simpler, and that is called a switch statement. So let's try rewriting this code to use a switch. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually make a copy of this code so that we can edit it into a switch statement as well as see what our original code looked like. So I'm just going to copy this, and I'm going to put it inside of a comment. That way, it won't actually be compiled, it won't actually be run. But we'll have it there for reference, and we can compare it with the new code we write. So the way I start a switch statement is with the word switch. So I'll write switch, open parenthesis, and then I'll have to put the name of a variable that I'm looking at. For example, here, all my comparisons are in terms of grade, right? So that's the thing that I'm looking at. So I'll do a switch on grade. So depending on the value of grade, different things will end up happening. So I've typed that in. I'm also going to put my curly brace there. And I'm also going to go ahead and put my curly brace at the end of this thing as well. I'll do a quick indent, spacing. So this is me starting to put my switch statement together. And you'll notice that this is going to really simplify some of our if statements. So over here, what I'm going to end up writing is the word case 100. And that'll get rid of that if statement there. So this is the way a switch statement compares its variable with some value. So here, this is saying, oh, switch on grade, and then inside, right, there's a bunch of different cases, right, of possible values for grade. Well, when it happens to be the case that grade is 100, grade is 10, we print out the message A plus, a perfect score. So let's continue to redo these. So this second statement I'll redo as well. I'll go here, case 9, case 8, and then my last one is going to be the case 7. And then something a little bit different is going to happen with this else statement here. So the else was the condition we wanted to be true, right? We wanted that to happen, to print the final grade as a D, when everything else failed. So for a switch, the word we use is a little bit different. We write the word default, which says, oh, none of the cases worked out for you. That means you need to just go to the default and do what's ever there. Now, one of the things I do need to add because of the switch statement is another keyword called break. So I'm going to go through and add a break to each of these cases, and we'll come back and talk about what that does in a minute or so. I don't need to add it to default. So let me go ahead and compile this and run it, and we'll see what we get. Hopefully we get the message saying, oh, you got a C. And that's what we get. Your grade is a C. Let's also change it to, for example, an 8. Run it again and see what we get back. This time we get final grade is a B. So it looks like this thing is working. This is a more concise way to write a bunch of if statements, right? Instead of having to write grade equal and then 9, all that kind of gets simplified, right? We just write the word case and then we put the number that we want to check for right after it. And then whatever code should be executed, that goes inside of the case, and then it's followed by the word break. One of the special bits here is, of course, the break statement. The break statement is designed to tell Java that the switch statement is done, that there's nothing else to do. If I don't have that break statement there, then Java will keep on checking the other cases and try to see whether one of the other ones match. You may notice that there's not a break at the end of the default case. That's because there's nothing left to do from that point, right? It doesn't matter to Java, right? You don't have to tell Java that the default is the end, right? It's already the last thing I have in my switch statement. Default really is just the equivalent of that final else, right, after a bunch of ifs, right? The thing that happens, none of the conditions actually do hold. Now, one of the cool features of switch statements is that we can have multiple cases trigger the same code. So let's say that I was instead developing a piece of grading software for pass or fail grading. In that case, there's only two things that are going to happen. I'm either going to pass or I'm going to fail. So all these grades here, 10, 9, 8, 7, should all be equivalent. Well, what I can do is I can delete out the code from my cases here. So I'm going to remove some lines. And I end up with this. I have my switch statement here. It says, okay, case 10, and then nothing happens. Case 9, nothing happens. Case 8, nothing happens. Case 7. And then case 7 has all the logic. But the way this works is that Java, when it's executing the switch statement, it's going to look at grade, compare it to these, and then if grade happens to be equal to any of these, it'll fall through. So if it's case 10, it's going to fall through and end up running this code here. The reason it does that is because I don't have any break statements in between to tell me that, oh, this is done, right? You shouldn't do anything else. Here, this is just saying, oh, fall through and do whatever the next case wants you to do. So if we try running this now, we should get the message that says we passed. And that's what we get. Final grade is a pass. I notice, right, that grade is set equal to 8. And 8 is a case that doesn't actually have anything inside of it. The point is, if I have a case without anything inside of it, it's going to fall through and activate the code inside of the next case, right? The next case, it's properly filled out. So this is a nice way to have multiple values of your input, right? Multiple values of grade, for example, all do the same thing.